When I am lost inside my mind, sing me the hope I cannot find. When my despair has left me blind, sing me the tune I've left behind. Will you sing over me? Will you sing over me? Sing of the goodness I cannot see. Will you sing over me? When all the grief pours through my hands, when I've forgotten who I am, I can't feel anything but shame. Sing out and give me back my name. Will you sing over me? Will you sing over me? Sing of the goodness I cannot see. Will you sing over me? Will you sing over me? When I sink down beneath the fear, the weight is more than I can bear. Keep singing though I cannot hear. Someday I'll sing for you, I swear. Will you sing over me? Will you sing over me? Sing of the goodness I cannot see. Will you sing over me? Will you sing over me? Will you sing over
Hello, and welcome on this Wednesday afternoon or evening or Thursday morning or Wednesday middle of the night, wherever and whichever time zone you find yourself in. My name is Brianna Russell, and I'm part of the team at Sanctuary Mental Health Ministries, which is a small but mighty ministry that equips the global church to support mental health and well-being. So I assume you're probably all well aware it's Mental Health Awareness Month in the US. Last week, we celebrated Mental Health Awareness Week in Canada, and this year we turn our attention to Mental Health Awareness Week in the United Kingdom. We know even though mental health is a vital topic year-round, right now we want to join our voice with the many to raise more awareness. So, if you joined us last week, welcome back. If you're joining us for the first time, we're so glad you're here. This is an ongoing part of our awareness campaign where we join with friends of Sanctuary Mental Health Ministries to learn and to listen in conversation. So listening is our theme for the month, learning from listening. And listening can be a holy act. At Sanctuary, we believe that the importance of listening to voices of people with lived experience is at the heart of the work we do. We know that there's so much that the church can learn from hearing people's stories in their own words, such as how to be a welcoming community to anyone whose mental health may be languishing. But in addition to highlighting people's stories, we're also exploring the benefits of listening as it relates to mental health. Now, I know it's a bit strange in this digital era to be joined together online to listen together, but our hope is that there's invitation in this. There's the chat box below this live, and we'd really love for you to participate, to listen together. Tell us where you're joining us from. If there's questions or comments that come up as we listen together, please put them in the chat so that even in this strange way, we can be present together. If you're interested in learning more about where listening fits into spiritual care, or what we can learn from listening to people with experiences of severe mental illness, then this conversation is for you. We're going to listen to Dr. Reverend John Swinton, practical theologian, and Sara Taylor, our UK director, in conversation. So let's join together and learn from listening.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Sara, the UK Director for Sanctuary Mental Health Ministries. As you may be aware, May is Mental Health Awareness Month in the US, and this week it's Mental Health Awareness Week in the UK. So this year our focus is learning from listening. Each week we are going to be in conversation with a sanctuary friend to learn from their expertise on how listening is a meaningful way to learn and care for one another along our mental health and faith journeys. So I'm really pleased to be here with our wonderful sanctuary ambassador and friend, Reverend Dr. John Swinton. He is a Scottish practical theologian based at the University of Aberdeen. Before moving into academia, he spent many years as a mental health nurse and chaplain, and that grounding has really shaped the way he thinks and writes. His work now sits at the intersection of theology, mental health, and disability, and has helped many of us, including me, think more deeply about what it means to offer care that is both spiritually and emotionally attentive. He is also the founder of the Centre for Spirituality, Health and Disability, an ordained minister of the Church of Scotland, and he also serves as chaplain to His Majesty the King. I mean, please, that gives us a sense of the breadth of his work and influence. So, John, it is really, really good to have you with us today. If we're looking at the topic of listening this week, so when you reflect on your own life, is there a time when you have felt deeply listened to, and how did that shape your understanding of yourself or the situation that you were in at the time?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if there's a time, but there certainly have been times when I've felt listened to, and it's usually when something goes wrong. And that's not because people don't listen at other times. It's because when things go wrong, you pay attention to the world in a slightly different way. And so the people that I felt most listened to is people that I can trust with my story at any moment in time, particularly the broken parts of my story. And so, the whole thing about listening is it's receiving a gift, right? So somebody gives you information, gives you their story, and the key is, how do you receive that? And how did the person think they're receiving it? So I find that when I'm telling people difficult stories, that's the space where I know whether I'm listened to or whether I'm not listened to, really. You're listened to when somebody's kind of clearly in the room with you, empathizing with you, in the same psychological space as you are when you're telling your story. And you can see it through their body movement, you can see it through their eyes, you can see it through the questions, the particular questions they ask, because the question somebody asks you kind of tells you whether they're listening. And you're not listened to if somebody is awkward or looking beyond you. And it's like, it's like when you're speaking to somebody in a cocktail party and they're always looking over their shoulder for somebody more important. A lot of people do that, or they look away. So that's the kind of times when I feel like I'm listened to, is when our bodies feel like are in tune and our words are in rhythm and our minds are clearly together in that position of giving stories and receiving stories.
That's so good. It's so true. I think that when people share their stories, it's so personal and they bring you into this space of intimacy that you're so privileged to hear. And I think you listen with that genuine integrity and authenticity is so important. Yeah. I think you can read a lot by their tone, their intonations, the way, as you say, their body language, everything. It's listening to somebody. It's not just when you're hearing them speak, just by listening, you can tell from the way they engage that, that's really. So has there been a time where you have found that your experience of being listened to has been shaped by the way that somebody engages? Has it altered how you felt in that moment?
I think it always alters how you feel, because the way in which people speak, for example, can be healing or it can be damaging. You mentioned intonation just now. I mean, sometimes we forget how important intonation is, even for the way in which we read the Bible. Where I come from, in the university system, to know and understand the Bible is to break it down into particular units, and then understand the units and understand the language and so on and so forth. But you have no sense of what the intonation is. So if Jesus says, for example, I am the way, the truth, and the life, you could say, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Yeah. And you get two radically different meanings with exactly the same words. And so I think that when it comes to listening and feeling you're being listened to, the way in which people speak to you, the intonation they use, the rhythm of their voice is fundamentally important. It doesn't necessarily come naturally. You have to practice it. You have to be aware that sometimes the way you, not just your body language, but the way you speak has a profound influence on somebody else. But you won't naturally reflect that way. But once you get into practicing it and noticing the way that it's how important it is for you, you can see how important it is for everybody. So I think that kind of thing is the way I always respond, where somebody's eyes are and the intonation that they have towards me.
Yeah, that's really good. I know that when I was working with young people a lot, that they can definitely tell, and they can read you like a book and see if you're listening, thoroughly or not. But I think there's also something in the way that your facial expressions have the ability to shut a conversation down. So especially when people are sharing something that's personal or intimate or a disclosure, if your face displays like shock or like that, they can change how they tell the story. Do you feel that, being truly listened to has spiritual significance? And if so, what kind of makes that sacred?
I think being truly listened to does have spiritual significance, because you begin to realize that you are a person in community, that you're not alone. Because one of the things that any kind of suffering does, or problems or troubles do, is it separates you from your community and yourself. You get so tied up in your own mental pain that you can't feel or experience anything else. So if nothing else, when you tell your story, you hear it yourself, and that's quite good because it's outside of your own head, which is a beginning point. And then if it's received properly, you realise that you're at least it's the beginning of joining in with people that you felt previously you were isolated from. Well, sacred, I guess, relates to a sense of holiness within any encounter or any space, because, spaces can be sacred in that sense. So when you listen to, as I say, you realise that you're part of a community, and there's something kind of in a real, with a small h, holy, in recognising that you're connected to somebody that previously you weren't connected with. So I think it's sacred in that sense. It's not necessarily religiously sacred, but in that broader sense of what the sacred is and what the holy feels like. That's kind of, I think that's how I would express that.
Yeah, entering into that sacred space of sharing. I think. No, I understand. From your practical theology perspective and the work that you do alongside people living with schizophrenia, how have you come to understand the role of listening when someone's experience might feel a little more fragmented or misunderstood? Well,
it's interesting because most of my professional life, I've kind of worked alongside and thought about the lives of people who live with schizophrenia. I did my PhD many years ago on schizophrenia and Christ-like friendship. Because schizophrenia is one of these conditions. It's highly constructed by society. We work with caricatures and things that we read in the media, and we forget sometimes it's just people going through difficult experiences, and people are people. So I think when it comes to schizophrenia, that's a beginning point. Recognising you're talking to someone, not a condition or not a caricature or a stereotype, but to someone. And also to realise that in the world there are many ways of understanding and experiencing the world. I mean, that's probably the one thing I've come to recognise over the years, that I see the world in one way, but many people across cultures or within mental health see the world differently. It's not a matter of right or wrong, it's seeing the world differently. And when you begin to see that the experiences that people with schizophrenia go through, something like hearing voices or seeing things other people don't see, they're a reality within their lives, and they're a meaningful reality. So they're not simply a symptom of the things that people are going through. Things like hearing voices, it's a very complicated phenomenon, but some people who hear voices have good relationships with their voices. So it's not like it's a negative symptom, it's an unusual experience. And it's interesting when you look at the research, something like 5 or 6% of the non-psychiatric population hear voices, as in people who don't receive any kind of care. So lots of us hear voices. In fact, more people who don't receive treatment hear voices than those who do receive treatment. It's how you manage them, it's how you understand them that's key. So when you think about it that way, you can see that voices, even something that's kind of emblematic of what people think mental illness might look like, are actually on a continuum, and we're all in the same space. It's not like people are over there and we're over here. So I think once you begin to realise that, and you find yourself moving beyond fear, because it can be very anxiety provoking, into that space where you're trying to understand the other person's world, even though you may never do that, I think that's the beginning point for friendship. I think that's the place for you, because friends don't demand that they think exactly the same. Friends enter into relationships and try to understand one another. And I think that's one of the keys when it comes to people who are having different or unusual experiences.
I think that's so true. And I just listening to you, and I was just thinking about so often those conversations are closed down because of fear, because of anxiety, because of not wanting to engage because you're concerned that you might say the wrong thing or you might do something that's going to upset somebody.
That's right.
And it's almost not giving people credit that they want to work with you, they want to have that conversation, and that they're also open to the fact that you may say something wrong, but if they can read your body language, they can read the way you're speaking with them and sharing them, that they'll know it was with no ill intent. So I think sometimes that fear that prevents us from reaching out, it's really inhibiting. And I think we shouldn't shut down those opportunities to have conversations with people, because they could be a really good space to learn from each other and to understand more about what it's like to live with a condition such as schizophrenia. So I think what you just said about fear is really true. Is there anything that you think that's different, that in a way of how does it look to listen with real spiritual attentiveness in those types of moments when you're engaging in those conversations?
I think the word attentiveness is the key. Well, there's two things. The word attentiveness is the key. You need to pay attention. Because a lot of time in life, and in any kind of conversation, you don't really pay attention. So I'm talking to you. I'm listening to some things. No offense. Some things are exactly. And so it's funny. I was at this conference in Princeton last week. And as part of my presentation, I was talking on words. The conference was on words and sacrament. I was talking about people that don't have words. And I said to them, we've been here for 3 days, and I asked ChatGPT to say how many words we'd used. And ChatGPT said approximately 120,000 words. And then I said, well, how many of these words will we remember? And ChatGPT went, very few. So the vast majority of the words that we spoke over these 3 days just were forgotten as soon as I've spoken them. And so, so I think it's a paying attention to what's going on, realizing that there are a lot of things that whiz past you, but realizing that within yourself, there are a lot of experiences and feelings that you need to acknowledge and be ready to put to one side. You know, for example, if you meet somebody for the first time, and you really don't like them, you can't understand, why do I really not like this person? It's because they remind you of somebody, and then you move on. The problem with somebody with schizophrenia is you meet them for the first time and they say to you, I have schizophrenia, and suddenly all you can feel is these cultural stereotypes that goes in, and that's how the conversation goes. So being able to recognize why you feel that, put it to one side and really listen to the person, paying attention, I think is the key.
Would you say that entering into that space of attentiveness is intentional? You need to be intentional about it?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that I was at a course once, a conference that we were at, and they were talking about the way people have those introductions, and you might have icebreakers, or if you're going to introduce yourself to somebody at church or something, you tend to ask them how they're doing or how their week's been, and people often answer from a work perspective or a family perspective. And how different it might be, that conversation might be, if we go out with the intention of saying, what's your story? You know, tell me that. It changes the conversation completely, but it does take intention, and it does take a willingness to actually listen through to what they say. You can't ask a question like that and then just be like, don't really want to listen now. This is awkward, I didn't mean to open this. So yeah, I think you've got to be willing to see it through when you ask those questions.
You do. But that's the same with it. It's not unusual to people with schizophrenia or mental health challenge. It's the same with everybody. We're constantly making mistakes. You're constantly testing. It just becomes more complicated because you don't necessarily understand as much as you may think you understand normally. But probably normally we don't understand as much as we think we do.
Absolutely. It's true of everyone.
Yeah.
And well, obviously, in this week, we have Sanctuary shared a video on social media. It was about the retired teacher, Nick Ewing, and he was talking about his experiences of feeling unheard, in particular by medical doctors. So, like many people who are navigating mental health challenges speak of feeling unheard by other people, and even sometimes feeling unheard by God. So how would you start to approach that pastorally? Is there any thoughts you've got on that?
Well, I would just say that very often people with mental health challenges are not heard. That's not in any sense a dig at the mental health professions. I'm a great fan of the mental health professions. But for all of us, as soon as we understand somebody as having a mental health challenge or having a diagnosis or having a particular label, that takes over. You know, and if you think about it this way, if you were to so you're going through these really strange experiences. You're seeing things other people don't see. You're hearing things others don't hear. It's causing you pain. It's separating you from your family. Big, rich story that goes into that. And then you go into to see a psychiatrist, and they give you a diagnosis. And you might disagree with that. But if you disagree with that, now you have a diagnosis, then that disagreement is kind of denial. But more than that, what diagnoses tend to do, important as they are for mental health professions is they can oftentimes thin the person's personal story, right? Can narrow it down to the shape and form of what people think the diagnosis is. And that big, rich place of narrative life gets lost. And that's why I think the gift that people like you and me who are not working professionally can give to people going through these experiences is the gift of listening and giving voice to people. Even when you don't agree with it, even if you think in your mind this doesn't make any sense, it doesn't matter whether you think it makes sense. If the person feels they're being heard, maybe that's the beginning point for a certain form of healing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that whether it's a diagnosis of schizophrenia, a diagnosis of something else, or no diagnosis, I think everybody can feel that way, feel that they're unheard. And I definitely think we could do more to listen well to people. And sometimes I think when we listen well to people, it's such a therapeutic experience for them. And it's so rewarding for the person who's listening to feel so privileged to be allowed into somebody else's space, into that narrative. And I think sometimes we make the mistake of thinking that when we're listening for the other person, but we're not. Half the time we're listening for ourselves, because it gives you so much back. It's such a two-way reciprocal relationship to be able to do that for somebody else. And what you gain back is so rewarding. So yeah, there's so much in that. It's such a rich experience. What do you think that we can learn from listening well to people with experiences like schizophrenia?
Well, it depends what they tell you.
That's very true. Very true.
I think in any human encounter, if you're open to it, you can learn something. Like, I guess that the thing that you'll learn for somebody who's going through, I don't know, a deep depression, is you'll learn not to use the language of depression flippantly. I'm fed up, it's Monday morning, I feel depressed. And you'll begin to be able to empathize properly, because you'll see that although culturally we've been taught that depression is just a kind of word for being sad, there's something completely different going on there. And so that you change your language, you destigmatize your language. When you leave that encounter, you're better equipped to be a kinder person who listens well. So I think that's the case for anybody, but I think that's particularly the case for forms of mental health challenges that are very often misunderstood.
I'm thinking it takes time, doesn't it, to do that well, to destigmatize your language, because it's so ingrained in the way we speak in society that it's just learned, and it doesn't come necessarily from a place of malice. It just comes from inexperience of being in those environments. So I think, as we said earlier, if you say something and you're in that situation and then afterwards you think, I shouldn't have said that, or I shouldn't have worded it differently, it's not a place to feel shameful or beat yourself up about it. It's just a learning experience, and then you take from that and you adjust things moving forward. And that's
that's definitely the case. But at the same time, not full stop, that is the case.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the language we use can be really quite dangerous in some senses. So, for example, if you find yourself saying, I'm a little bit OCD because I'm tidying my desk, what you're doing is you're neutralizing suffering. You're actually appropriating somebody's mental health diagnosis, putting it into a very trivial form and claiming that you have the same thing as they are, which means when they tell the story, you'll be able to say, I know how you feel because my desk's tidy too. So at one level, it's kind of frivolous and funny. At another level, it's absolutely not, because it increases people's suffering and stops us from hearing suffering in all of its fullness.
And that's why courses like the Sanctuary Report and having those things are so beneficial to people, to be able to have that level of understanding.
That's right.
You start to destigmatize mental health situations all across the church and across the communities.
Sometimes when it comes to mental health, people think, I don't know what to do. And the temptation is, here are 10 things to do. But actually, a lot of the things to do is just be a human being. Be kind. Be gentle. Be careful with your language. Exactly. And that'll do the job. You don't need a technique.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think context is really important as well. And I think that's something that changes with the language, because sometimes just because somebody has a diagnosis, that doesn't mean that when you're talking to someone who might have a diagnosis of schizophrenia in one environment, that if you move into a different environment and meet somebody else, that it's the same situation for them. Because context cultural backgrounds, all of those things play into the way that experience is lived out for that person.
Absolutely.
And I think we can be quick to forget that sometimes. In your experience, what happens when listening is rushed or absent, it's missing, especially in the context of mental health?
Well, I think one of the major problems and challenges that we have in culture is that we are beginning to assume that absence is the norm. It's a social media thing. Like, so you and I could be, you're in Suffolk, right? We said we could be, or is it Suffolk or Stafford? You're somewhere in Englandsville. But say we were in the same room, and you're on your phone and I'm on my phone. You could be in Vietnam. I could be speaking to somebody in Australia. We're in the same room, but we're actually not in the same room at all. Not present, but we're absent. So I think this, going back to the question of intentionality, one of the things that we need to be able to do is to be present for one another in the midst of any encounter. And that means learning from the absence that's coming from culture and learning that when we sit down together, this is, to use the language you used earlier, a sacred moment that isn't defined by what we have to do next, but is defined by this present moment. And that's a difficult thing to do because we're not used to do that. Because we're very oftentimes task-oriented or diary-oriented. So I'm having this conversation with you and I'm thinking, it's almost 4 o'clock and I've got to do this. And so as long as I can keep my face straight, you'll never know. But getting out of that habit and really being interested in the person before you and wanting to learn something about them as them, I think is the first kind of stage of healing relationships.
Yeah, I think, isn't it interesting, because when you're in a conversation like that and you can feel that those tasks are looming over you and you've got somewhere else that you've got to be, and you want to be honourable to the person that you've got to meet with next, so you don't want to necessarily leave them. People feel awkward, and what do they do in that moment? But I also think it's okay in those moments to say, do you know what you're saying is really interesting, and I really want to come back to this. Is it okay if we reschedule another time to speak some more? I think there's times when that's appropriate. There's other times when you need to just stay and listen, and it's
absolutely
navigate that situation.
And I think you have to, and never yawn in the middle of a conversation. Well, the minute you look at the watch, that's the end of the relationship.
Yeah.
But the other side of that, of course, is that some people can be very demanding and have no sense of boundaries. So boundaries are really important. So it's important to give people time and attention, but it's important to keep boundaries. Otherwise, you become damaged by the encounter, and that should never happen. Yeah,
I think self-care is really important. In that you have to keep looking after yourself to be able to engage with people well. Yeah. So if someone wanted to become a more compassionate listener in the context of mental health, where would you invite them to even begin? Are there any resources that you'd recommend or any advice that you'd give in that area?
No, two things. First, I would say it's no different from anybody else. It's not like you're looking for a special way of being with people with mental health challenges. It's just the way that we should be with one another, which means the things that you practice for most of your life, you just have to slightly adapt when the person before you is thinking slightly differently. So it's not a new set of competencies. It's actually beginning to utilize yourself as a caring being. To be honest with you, something like the Sanctuary course does as good a job as any, because what it does is it raises our consciousness to key issues, but also gives us a way of understanding the lived experience of mental health challenges in a context that takes seriously both theology and psychology. So from my perspective, I would, it's going to sound a bit like I'm creeping, but because I'm on a Sanctuary thing, but I would always be recommending Sanctuary materials as the beginning point. And there's lots of reading material that goes along with that if you wanted to move beyond that.
No, that's really good. I think that's a really good suggestion. And as you say, it's a journey, isn't it? If nobody expects you to read one book and then just wake up the next day and you're the best active listener in the world.
No.
It takes practice, and it takes intention. It takes time.
Yeah.
But I think it's having the heart. We want to do it. That's the biggest part. Well, honestly, John, thank you so much for joining
That's
us today.
pleasure.
Thank you for reminding us that listening is not passive. You know, it is one of the kindest, gentlest, and most meaningful ways that we can care for each other and show that we're there. Sometimes when there's no other answers that you can give, listening is the thing that you can do. So really appreciate you joining us and being part of this conversation. And I truly think that we all leave with a deeper awareness of what it means to be present in that moment for compassion, you know, for ourselves and for each other. So thank you again.
What an incredible conversation. Gosh, I could listen to them go on, and it's not just the accents. Really love the content there. When John said, a person is a person is a person, that really stood out to me. And when he says that our language has the power to be healing or to be damaging, the way that we speak. In our comments, I also just wanted to say that Colleen left a really great comment when watching. She said that she appreciated the encouragement to expand our perspective, not to place experiences that we don't understand into a box. What a beautiful way to summarize it, Colleen. Thanks for sharing that. I think you also heard mention within the film or within the conversation of Mick's film, that is his story, part of his story of living with schizophrenia. And just to note that that is in our feed, our channel here. So you can go below here or wherever you find yourself on the page and go and maybe watch that afterwards if you haven't watched it yet. It's part of some of the offerings that we're trying to put out this month to continue the conversation and to bring awareness. So we're spotlighting voices of lived experience. You can hear from Kate Blewett in our first week or Mick this week. We're sharing conversations. The one that's coming up after this will be with our CEO, Daniel Whitehead, and Kay Warren. So be sure to tune into that live as well. If you hop on over to social media, on Facebook or Instagram, we're sharing facts and data about mental health and faith. So it's a really great place to learn more. And each week we're offering a prayer or a blessing. This week's blessing is from Reverend Dr. John Swinton, A Blessing in the Storm. So I encourage you to find that on our socials as well. And make sure when you're there, follow us. Join the community, join the conversation, or join here too on YouTube for the content that we're putting out. I don't see any more questions or comments coming in, but do know that you can leave a message there. I'm really tempted to share a story of John listening well to me, but then I'm worried about how it will be eternalized here on YouTube. But I think I'm going to do it anyways, because sometimes it's good to hear the personal too. I've had the pleasure of being in conversation with John a lot, and at one particular point, we were in conversation in front of a bunch of pastors here in Vancouver, BC. And as we were in conversation at the very beginning, we took a break and John leaned over and he said to me, "You know, you talk with your eyebrows, right?" And I was like, "Actually, I didn't." He said, "You talk with them and you listen with them." And I thought, oh, that's interesting. But this goes to his first point about listening to the whole person and listening to expression and listening to body language. But the really funny part, and you probably picked up on it a little bit in this conversation, is John has an incredible sense of humor. So for the rest of that conversation in front of this crowd of pastors, he and I were sit kind of on the diagonal. And every time I would start to ask him a question, he would just start moving his eyebrows. And I could barely keep a straight face for the rest of the interview. I think when we're present to people and when we find a way of connection, whether it's noticing something in them or affirming something in them, it actually gives us such a greater base to be in dialogue about these important things. It doesn't mean we always say the right thing, but it does mean that we're present and attentive and show up for each other. Friends, there's an invitation not just to subscribe here, but to become part of the larger conversation that's happening around mental health and faith. And you can do that in your own communities, in your family or in your workplace or in your church, in small groups, by using our free resources. So we have quite a few resources, and I encourage you to go check them out on our website. Our flagship, the Sanctuary Course, and the Sanctuary Course for Catholics, helps equip participants with the tools they need, not only to have conversations around mental health and faith, but to listen well. Within the course, you can hear stories from Christians with lived experiences of mental health challenges and be equipped with practical tools for listening. So it's free. It's an 8-session small group resource created to help churches have these conversations. And each session typically includes a short film featuring lived experience, theologian, pastors, and clinicians. There's reading material from an excellent course book. There's guided group discussion questions, so you can ask and hear and attend well to those in your community. And there's reflective practices such as prayer, art, or journaling that are included. As I invite you to come back again and join us again, join our community, join the conversation. We're going to end our time together by watching the Sanctuary Course for Catholics trailer. Thanks so much for being here. It's been a joy to learn from listening with you. Have a great evening or day or week or wherever you find yourself. Take care.
I was experiencing suicidal thoughts. It would be better if I wasn't here. I'm really a burden on my family and I should just go away.
Heavenly Father, we come before you who have created us in your image and likeness.
I thought about dying. I just thought, what was the point? There's always something wrong with me. I can't be happy.
You have made us your sons and daughters.
Thoughts were going through my mind like, why are you here? What's the point?
We ask you, Lord, to strengthen us in our faith.
Nothing's wrong with you. You're being a little kid. You're being a baby. Get over it.
Continue to pour forth your healing spirit upon those who suffer from mental illness.
I was diagnosed with clinical depression. I saw that as something that was bad about me. If I just prayed hard enough and if I just did the right moves in my life, then God would take it away from me.
I think as Catholics, some of us can tend to over-spiritualize things and to underestimate the human and the natural.
When people might not fully understand the importance of mental health, they might say, yeah, well, maybe you just need to pray more, go to Mass more. If your faith were stronger, you wouldn't have these issues.
I'm a Christian, but I'm human. And if I can be physically ill, I can be mentally ill.
Too often when we're in a crisis, it feels like this is it. And if something doesn't happen right now, it will never be better. It's hard to see a way that this could be different. Hang in there, get help, because it really can be different.
I look up at the cross and I see Jesus' broken body. I know that he knows my suffering. He can understand what I've been through. He can understand what I will go through, and he's there for me.
There is a really profound truth that suffering unites us or pulls us closer to Christ.
The connection between me and the rest of the body of Christ is real. Suffering united with the suffering of Christ actually has implications for the church.
Faith is about me and God in the context of community, to be known by each other, to support each other, to help each other.
In relationship, that is where profound healing takes place. We're never called by God to walk through this life alone.
When there is a hand that can guide you through God, it will be inspiring to know that there's someone there who may be able to help you.
You're not alone. That's the biggest thing I could say is you're not alone.